After the past few weeks, I've highlighted a new book that my next guest has spent more than 2 years in writing. And earlier this week, the book was officially released. It's entitled Life After Roe, Equipping Christians in the Fight for Life Today. And as I've mentioned before, this is an outstanding book. It looks at abortion and the whole life issue from the perspective of a biblical, a historical, as well as a political perspective. And the author, FRC's very own David Closson, he was on the program, in fact, earlier this week with Tony. But I want to go into a little bit deeper dive on the message of the book and also discuss some breaking news that just happened this morning that regards the life issue. So joining me now, David Closson, the director of FRC's Center for Biblical Worldview and the author of Life After Roe, Equipping Christians in the Fight for Life Today. David, welcome back to Washington Watch and congratulations.
Well, thank you, Jody. It's great to be on the program with you again.
Well, listen, as a published author myself, I know how terribly exciting it is when the book is finally released to the world, and I want to get into that more specifically. But before we do, just today, we had some breaking news on the life issue coming out of the United Kingdom, where a woman was arrested for holding a sign that just simply said, if you want to talk, I'm here. What do you think about this case?
Yeah, Jody, this should be setting alarm bells all over England, but in the United States as well. So just very briefly, kind of the background of this case, it goes back to spring of 2023. And you have Dr. Livia Tasiki-Bolt, and she was outside an abortion clinic holding up a sign that said simply, "Here to talk if you want." Now, Jody, that seems pretty innocent, pretty benign. That doesn't sound very threatening. But the crime that she was committing was she was standing in a buffer zone because in 2022, there was a local ordinance that was passed that basically says that any activities that can be perceived as influencing or be kind of distressing to patients or doctors at this abortion clinic, that this was illegal. And so again, the sign made no explicit reference to abortion. She didn't harass anybody. Again, she didn't even speak to anybody. And yet, folks saw that she had this sign and she was prosecuted. And the judge this morning, Jody, handed down a sentence of 20,000 pounds, which I'm told is about $26,000, for the crime, again, of holding a sign that says, "I'm here if you want to talk." Now, Jody, again, this was a local ordinance that she was prosecuted on, but what's even more concerning is that in 2023, they passed a national law in the United Kingdom called the Public Order Act of 2023, and in Section 9 of that law, it creates what's known as these safe access zones, which are these buffer zones. So across the United Kingdom, England, Wales, it is illegal to be within 150 meters of an abortion clinic. By the way, if you're not up on your metric system, that's 160 yards, a football field and a half, that you can't be outside an abortion clinic and even silently pray in some instances. So this is alarming. By the way, Jody, this is what J.D. Vance, when he was at that security conference in Munich, was trying to draw attention to. This is what our State Department has been talking about. So these are grave concerns for religious freedom, for free speech, and it shows that pro-lifers abroad really are facing a lot of government hostility.
They absolutely are, but the reality is this is not just individuals abroad. I mean, we've got challenges right here in our own country. In fact, your book, you have an entire chapter dealing with some of the ongoing challenges that we're facing right here in our own country when it comes to the life issue and standing for the unborn. And so, yeah, it's chilling what just happened in the UK, but we've got issues of our own right here. Kind of highlight some of those for us. What are some of the big challenges that we're facing here in America?
Yeah, let me give you just briefly a couple, Jody, that I do talk about in the book. You have these Since Roe was overturned on June 24, 2022, 17 states have had kind of referendum, 17, and out of those 17, 14 of them have gone the pro-abortion direction. And the way these state referendums are, out-of-state millions can kind of fund the pro-abortion side, spread lies, misinformation. That's a huge threat. Another threat would be chemical abortion. I think I've been having conversations since my book came out, and if a lot of folks like me who grew up in the 90s, we remember going on Saturday morning to kind of pray outside an abortion clinic. And I think maybe for some people my age and older, we still think that image comes to mind. But over 60% of abortions don't take place at abortion clinics anymore. It's through chemical abortion, the 2-pill regimen of mifepristone and misoprostol that was approved in 2000 by the Clinton administration. And then, of course, the Obama and then Biden administration walked back some of those requirements, some of those safeguards, so to speak. So those are massive problems. One other intellectual critique that I talk about in the book, Jody, is, again, when I was growing up, a lot of people said, well, on the pro-abortion side, well, it's just a clump of cells. It's just a clump of cells. Increasingly, no one makes that argument anymore. Why is that? Well, because my generation grew up with ultrasounds. We grew up with the ultrasound image on the refrigerator, and we knew that's my little brother, my little sister, my cousin. And so again, I unpack this in the book. But I think what I'm telling Christians who are engaging in this issue, you need to be aware of kind of the intellectual pro-abortion argument that's being used, which is personhood theory. Personhood theory basically posits this idea that there's a distinction between being biologically human and being a person that has moral standing and therefore has legal rights. Again, get into this a lot in the book. But again, as Christians, we can't buy that personhood theory, that personhood is something that we achieve at some point in the developmental process. As Christians, we believe all people are made in God's image, and that happens at the moment of conception, that you have value and dignity and worth. And so, again, this idea that there's a distinction between being biologically human and being a person with moral worth and dignity, that's kind of, I know I'm going through it quickly, that's kind of the intellectual argument that undergirds much of the pro-abortion argument. We need to be aware of that, and as Christians realize there's no room in a biblical worldview for that idea.
Wow, great information there. I'm glad you brought up the ultrasound because that's obviously what I grew up with as well. How, these things are so precise anymore. How in the world, David, can people having seen an ultrasound, having utilized that technology, how can they then advocate for the killing of an unborn baby and can keep a straight face about it? I mean, this is a baby.
Yeah, I think Scripture gives us categories for this. Scripture uses the language of being hardened, and unfortunately, if Jody, you've been a pastor and a congressman. You've been involved in this battle for a long time. There is spiritual warfare that's involved in this. And frankly, when you deny what your eyes tell you, you deny what good science and philosophy and theology teach you, over time you can become hardened. You can become calloused. Your conscience, that moral sense that we all have that's embedded in us, it can be that the voice of your conscience, as you suppress the truth in unrighteousness, as Paul talks about in Romans 1, that voice can become fainter and fainter and fainter till you don't even hear it anymore. And so again, as Christians, we want a rightly calibrated conscience, and we want to see that for our friends on the other side of this issue as well. Because if you have a rightly calibrated conscience, you'll see through the means of common grace and science that the unborn is made in God's image and has value and dignity, and is just, it doesn't matter what point on the developmental stage you're in, you're human, and therefore you have value and dignity.
Well said. I think we've gone far beyond the science. This is just a political battle, really, and that's unfortunate that science has been pushed aside because you can't continue denying that what's in the womb is a baby. But let me go back to this, David. I know you've had probably tons of opportunities to talk about your book with multiple media outlets, but I think our audience might be particularly interested in church history. And last year, MSNBC host Joe Scarborough literally made the statement that the church has been pro-choice from the time of the apostles all the way till the Beatles broke up. And, most of us hear that kind of statement, and we say, that's just, that is totally false in every way. But you prove in your book that the church has indeed been pro-life from the beginning. So what did you uncover in your research?
Yeah, I have the book right here, Jody, and it's chapter 3 of the book. And again, this is hundreds of hours I spent at the Library of Congress here in D.C. doing the research. And what I found is that from the first century, the church has been pro-life. And why is that? Well, the church was pro-life from the beginning because the Bible is so manifestly and consistently pro-life itself. But from the first century, and let me read a couple of very brief quotes, Jody, to make the point. First century, in the moral instruction manual that Christians were using was called the Didache. And it says this in the Didache, that you shall not murder a child by abortion, nor kill that which is begotten. First century, that's pretty clear. Second century, Clement of Alexandria, he said this, that Christians should not, in an effort to hide sexual sin, take away human nature, which is generated from the providence of God, by hastening abortion and applying abortifacient drugs to destroy utterly the embryo, and with it the love of man. Tertullian, writing in the 2nd to 3rd century, he says, to hinder a birth is merely a speedier man-killing. Again, just very clear moral language. Augustine, he writing in the 4th century, calls it cruel lust, that would resort, and here's the quote, to such extravagant methods as to use poisonous drugs to secure barrenness, or else, if unsuccessful in this, to destroy the conceived seed by some means previous to birth. And final quote I'll give you, fast forwarding to the Reformation, John Calvin wrote this. He says, for the fetus, though enclosed in the womb of its mother, is already a human being, and it is a monstrous crime to rob it of the life to which it has not yet begun to enjoy. So I can't think of more clear moral language, Jody, and that's true for 2,000 years of church history.
Wow, that is some powerful tools for our viewers and listeners to be able to utilize. Again, I want to encourage everyone to get the book, and just a moment I'll give you an opportunity to tell everybody where they can get it. One of the things that surprised me from your first chapter was that 44% of pastors, only 44%, have preached about abortion in the 12 months after Roe was overturned. Why is this? Why are we not having churches and church leaders, spiritual leaders discuss this?
Yeah, Jody, I think in one sense it boils down to fear of man. There are a lot of pastors who don't want to offend people in their congregation because they know abortion is a controversial topic. In fact, I would say kind of especially younger preachers, guys I went to seminary with, we were brought up and we heard the criticism of the moral majority of Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson. Frankly, Jody, the older I get, the more I realize how those guys were really right on the issues, and their diagnosis of the culture was right on. But I think there was kind of this idea of, well, we don't want to serve the donkey or the elephant, we want to serve the lamb. And so, if there's political issues, we just don't want to touch those. And I get the impulse behind that. But I would just say, where the scripture is clear, we need to be clear, brother pastor. And when it comes to the life issue, we have text. We don't have to guess what God's opinion. And so I would just encourage pastors, don't give in to fear of man. And by the way, 71% of regular churchgoers tell us, in the survey we did with George Barna, that they want their pastor to teach and preach about abortion and the value of life. So I would just be encouraged to do that.
All right, last two questions real quickly. I'll give them to you as one. Who is the primary audience of your book? Are we talking pastors, Sunday school teachers, parents? Who is the audience, and how can people get a copy?
Yeah, Jody, I would say all of the above. I think this is a book that is, it's written for people who care about the issue, and it comes at it, like you said earlier, from a theological, biblical, historical, and political perspective. And so those who have preaching and teaching opportunities, those who have discipleship opportunities. So I think pastors, preachers, Sunday school teachers, I'd say Christian parents, if you do homeschooling, Christian co-op, really anyone who wants to provide discipleship and catechesis on this issue, I think would benefit from the book. And you can find the book wherever books are sold. So you can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's published through Lifeway. And through the end of this month, Jody, you can still go to lifeway.com, enter the keyword Washington Watch, all one word, and viewers and listeners of this program get 40% off. So again, go to lifeway.com and use that code Washington Watch and get 40% off.
Life After Roe, Equipping Christians in the Fight for Life Today. Excellent book. Thank you for writing it, for all the research. David Closson, Director of the Center for Biblical Worldview here at FRC. Thank you so much for this outstanding work. As always, thanks for joining us on this Friday.